starting a brand new message series this morning here at Journey. It's entitled Small Things, Big Difference. And one of the reasons I decided to do this is because I know that there are things in all of our lives that maybe we would like to change. In our lives and in the lives of people that we love, we know there are certain things that we wish were different. And we don't have power over everything. We don't control everything, but there are things that we wish were different. But often when we start thinking about changing, when we start thinking about making changes in our life, they seem so overwhelming. Like we look at in totality, they're really huge things that need to change in our lives, and we don't even know how to go about getting started. So oftentimes we don't do that. But what I have found is that it's not always the big things that you need to change. Sometimes it's just the small things you need to change. Small things can make a big difference in life. And I love that opening video. And one of the reasons I chose to show it at the beginning of this message series is because it shows that in Scripture, God actually says, I'm making all things new. Notice Scripture doesn't say God is making all new things. He's making all things new. Our God is a God of restoration. He restores things. He makes things like they are new. And there are some things about my life and the lives of those that I love that with God's help, they can be very different. You don't have to be where you are and who you are. It could be different if we'll just take some small steps to begin that process. And it can be in all kinds of ways. I mean, I don't know what you want to change about your life. Maybe some of you would like to get in better shape or lose some weight. That's a constant struggle as you begin to get older. Or maybe you just want to eat better so that you can feel better about yourself. For some of you, maybe you want to be more spiritually focused, or you want to spend more time with your family, with your kids, those people that you love, and you want to make some changes so you can spend more time with them. Or maybe you want to get your finances in order, or you want to stop some bad habit that you have, something that you know you should probably try to control or have some kind of control over. But whatever it is, anything that you think you'd want to change, and I don't know what it is for all of you guys, but I have been praying all week, and I believe that God has given us the ability to change things in our lives. I don't think we have to stay the same. And there's something about setting a goal that just brings so much hope. When you have a goal, when you're something that you're striving towards, and I guess really it's almost psychological. It's almost a psychological. You make a decision in your heart, because really you could actually change anytime you want to, can't you? I mean, you have to decide to do that, but then you can have that hope because you've made that decision. For example, we don't have to wait till New Year's, do we, to set a goal, right? We don't have to wait and make some kind of New Year's resolution. Often people will do that because they feel like it's a new year, I'm going to get started on this, but we can actually make changes anytime we want to. We just have to make the decision to do it. Now, even with that, you do have to give it some thought. You do need to be realistic. You have to be strategic, because I don't know anybody that about a week before Thanksgiving says, wow, this would be a really good time to start a diet. Really? I really want to be on this very restrictive diet from right now all the way through Thanksgiving and Christmas, all the way to New Year. Said no one ever, right? That's not a good time to make those changes. But even with that, when we look at our lives, we look at the lives of people that we know, maybe you know some people and they seem like they have it all together. Like they are the perfect picture. They got the perfect career, the perfect family, everything. And they have their act together more than I do anyways. A lot of times, I don't know about you guys, but I'll look at them and that kind of intimidates me. Like you see people who are doing it right. And for me, I'll look at their lives and I'll think, you know what? I don't even know. They have it so together in their lives. I don't even know what I don't even know what big changes I would have to make to get to where they are. It kind of intimidates me. I have no idea what big changes I would have to make in my life and how I would even go about doing that to get to where they are. And if you've ever felt that way, I want to share some good news with you this morning. Because it's really not, I don't believe it's really the big things that we need to focus on. I think really it's the little, if you're taking notes, this is the key thought, not only for this week, but for the entire message series. And you're going to hear me say this several times. It's often the small things that no one even sees or observes. It's often the small changes that we make that will bring about the big changes that everybody really wants. And we tend to look at it and think, I'd have to change so much. This is so daunting and so difficult. I don't even know how I'm going to do that. But it is often the small things that no one sees that results in the big changes that everyone wants. And it's sometimes small changes that in your life over time will make your life better and make the big changes that maybe you want to have in life. Let me give you some examples of what I'm talking about. There was a guy I knew years ago when I first became a Christian, and he was a guy that I really admired. And one of the things, I mean, he was a great guy, but one of the things I really admired about him was his relationship with God. Because a lot of people say they are Christians, and I don't know if you've ever known anybody like this, but he didn't even have to say it because he lived it out. He was just the kind of guy. I mean, you could tell he was a Christian because he was so Christ-like in his life in so many ways. He offered grace and forgiveness to everybody. He was very serious about his understanding of God, and he was so full of love. And you could tell that he was led by the Spirit, and everything that he did and everything that he said, he was just a very easy guy to admire. And I asked him one time as we got to know each other, I actually couldn't stand it, and I had to ask him, and I said, what is your secret? I mean, what big things did you have to do in your life to be able to get your relationship with God to where you are today, to have such mature faith and a great understanding of God? And he said, well, honestly, it really changed for me. He said, if you'd known me 20 years ago, I wasn't the same guy. He said, but about 17 years ago, he said, I started really trying to understand the Bible. And not just reading it, over a year so I could say, hey, I followed my schedule, I read the Bible in a year. He said, not like that at all. He said, I started looking at it in a deliberate way and meditating on it in a methodical way. And so I wasn't just reading words on a page so I could say, hey, I read it, so I could feel like God must be proud of me because I read it. He said, but I did it so I would think about what it really says and what that really meant to me, and I meditated on that. And I said, well, yeah, 17 years. I mean, 17 years of studying the Bible like that's such a huge accomplishment. And he said, no, it really wasn't, because he said the way I approached it was, he said, it only took me about 15 minutes a day. He said, I would dedicate 15 or 20 minutes a day, turn off my phones and not talk with anybody. And he said, I found that if I was just faithful in doing that, 15 or 20 minutes a day, over a few years, yes, I had read the entire Bible, but not only that, he said, I had absorbed so much of what God has revealed in his word. And he said, he credited that 15-minute of study a day as the catalyst that changed his whole life and his whole relationship with God. And I thought, well, you know what? I can do that. I mean, I'm a busy guy, but 15 minutes a day? I can spare 15 minutes a day to dedicate to studying the Bible. And over the last 20 years or so, I have read so much of what God has said. And honestly, that small change, that change in the approach that I had to trying to understand God changed everything about my relationship with God. Not to mention, I understand him a lot better. I understand his words so much better, and that has increased significantly. Another example, I knew a guy back in Tennessee, a good friend of mine, and he had went to school and he had studied, and he was a licensed marriage counselor. Now, I do counseling from time to time when people are getting married, but I wanted to get his insight because he had like a PhD. He had studied this stuff, and he counseled all the time. And so I asked him one time, because I want to have a good marriage. So I remember I asked him one time, I said, you worked with marriages over years and years and years, and you've studied this stuff. What do you think is the most important thing? What is the secret? What is the most important thing to a successful marriage? And he didn't even hesitate. He didn't think about it. He didn't have to ponder. He simply said, beyond a shadow of a doubt, you want to have a great marriage? Spend time, invest time actually talking to the one you have chose to spend your life with, and you need to do it every single day. And I said, okay, you're talking about like a conversation, like an hour? Do we have to schedule like an hour a day or something like that? And he said, no, not like that. He said, what you need to do is just make sure that it's a priority, that sometime during your day, each and every day, that you share your thoughts and your concerns and your heart with the one person you have chosen to be your life partner. And it doesn't have to be a certain amount of time, but it needs to be intentional. You need to know every day that you're going to connect with that person that you are going through life with, and this will keep your partnership alive, and you'll know each other's heart. And I thought, well, you know what? I could do that. I could talk to my wife every day. She's my best friend anyways, that would be easy. And I'm telling you what, this one small discipline of us making time, and we'll sit down specifically for this time. We don't have to announce it's like, okay, come on now, it's time for us to do this. But every single day we connect emotionally, we share our hopes, our dreams, our thoughts, our ideas, and it's really changed our relationship for the better. And what we do is we've kind of combined it because we spend time together. One of the things my wife and I started doing a number of years ago is we started walking together, and we try to do it 4 or 5 times a week, and we actually do it at a brisk pace, and we go about 4 or 5 miles a day when we do it. And last year, for example, we walked over 1,000 miles. My wife and I, we walked 1,000 miles, and we talked pretty much the whole time. We're talking, and so we're kind of two birds with one stone kind of thing here. Exercise and sharing our hearts, an investment in our health, but it's also an investment in our relational health, and it only takes a little over an hour a day. We have that kind of time, so we do that, but it's an important investment. And I'm going to tell you what, we are so close now. We can talk about everything and anything because we spend so much time sharing our hearts with each other. And I want to tell you guys that I believe with all my heart that you can make some small changes in your life, and over time, it will actually change some things. You'll have a very, very different future. It really, really will. And chances are it's not the big things that you need to change in life. It's maybe some small things. The big things are intimidating, but small things, you can make that one small change that no one sees. You don't even have to announce it or tell anybody about it, but it'll actually bring about these big changes that we're looking for in life. And so what I want to do today as we get started, I'm going to show you this from the book of Zechariah. It's an Old Testament book, and it's in chapter 4 where we begin the story. And then what I want to do as we look at Zechariah, I want to kind of tell you where we're going to go. I'm going to give you a preview of the rest of this series, and then I'm going to give you one very specific, small kind of focused assignment, and you can just focus on one thing. I don't want you to think about all the things you have to change in your life. We're going to take this one step at a time, and it'll make a very big difference in your life. So let me kind of give you the backstory or the context of Zechariah chapter 4. Is during this time, what was going on is the temple of God that Solomon had built, that David had wanted to build, and then Solomon built, and it was this beautiful, huge temple. It had been destroyed. It had been totally destroyed. And so God's people, the Israelites, they weren't even living in the promised land anymore. They had been, they were living in captivity, right? So obviously it's a pretty low point in their history, right? Things aren't going well. They're like, well, we don't even have a temple to worship God anymore. We're not even in the promised land like we were supposed to be. And this is horrible. This is a horrible situation for God's people. And because of this, the Israelites were understandably and not surprisingly pretty depressed, right? And so in the year 537 BC, there was a guy named Zerubbabel. What a great name, isn't it? I wanted to name our first son Zerubbabel, but my wife said no, go figure. Right? I think it's a great name. That's a great biblical name. But anyways, this guy Zerubbabel, he led a small group of people in 537. God spoke to him, and he led a small group of people back into the promised land, back to Jerusalem, where they were going to have the temple. So at least now there's some hope. At least now there's some hope. The king that was ruling over them in captivity said, yeah, you can go and you can scope things out. And so then you would think that they would begin right away. No, this took a while, okay? And sometimes it's small changes over time that make the big difference. So it was about 18 years later, God spoke to Zerubbabel and said, I'm going to give you, Zerubbabel, I'm going to give you the power to rebuild the temple. And it's a huge, huge assignment. So let's start in verse 6 of Zechariah chapter 4. This is what the Lord actually said to Zerubbabel. He says, not by force, and it's not by strength, but it is by my spirit that this will be built, said the Lord of heaven's armies. In other words, the temple's not going to be built in a way where you could take any credit for it whatsoever. You guys won't get the credit for it, but God is the one who's going to actually make it happen. And here's the things about this. You can try to change. You probably have. You can try to change. You can make a New Year's resolution. You can set a goal, and you can try to do it all in your own power. With your own willpower, you can do that. And no doubt, you can make some incremental improvements in your life simply by trying to exert your willpower in your own strength. You've probably done it. I've done it too, to a degree. But if you will tap into the power of what God is talking about here, a power that is far greater than that which you possess, if you could tap into the power and use that the Holy Spirit is involved in your life, man, that will make all the difference. It's not by your own strength that you can accomplish all these things, not by your effort, not by your might, not by your power, but by His Spirit, because that changes things on a monumental degree. Years ago, I had a friend right after I got out of the Navy, and he bought a house, and he had some nice landscaping going on, but he had a couple of trees, not much bigger than the trees we have out here, but he had these trees and he wanted to pull them out of the ground. And so he invited me to come over for a party, a working party. And that's what we used to call it in the military. It's a working party, not a fun party. Now, I'm not a real handy guy, but this was shovels and picks. And so I went over and we started digging and we started pulling. And I'm telling you what, it was horrible. It was horrible. This is in San Diego and it was hot. It was horrible hot. And we're getting nowhere. Hours into it, we're getting nowhere. And a guy pulls up, one of his buddies, a guy on the street. He said, "What are you guys doing?" And I'm like, what do you think we're doing? You know, we're out here killing ourselves trying to get these trees out. And he said, "I'll be right back." And I said, "Oh, good. Maybe he's going to go get a shovel. He's going to come help us, you know. We'll welcome any help." But he came back about 20 minutes later. He had a little trailer. And on the back of this trailer, he had a thing called a Bobcat. You guys know what a Bobcat is? This is an amazing device. He took this thing, this Bobcat, and he was able to pull these, in a matter of 15 minutes, he had pulled these trees out of the ground and stacked them up. The bottom line is I can work all day long in my own strength, but every now and then, you need a Bobcat. Okay, every now and then, you're going to need something that has so much more power than you can muster on your own. You can try your best all day long, and yes, you can make some changes, but when you tap into the Spirit of God, it makes all of the difference. There's a strength and there's a power there beyond anything you could ever muster on your own. Some of you guys, maybe you've tried, and you've tried for years. You tried really, really hard, and you know, kudos for you for trying that hard. You've tried to change something, to improve something, and it turned out in the end that you just couldn't do it. And so now you feel all defeated. But this time, it will not be in your own power. It will not be by your own strength, but you will let God be part of the equation, and that can make all of the difference. God says here, "I'm going to give you the power to rebuild this temple." It looks hopeless, right? Most of your population is in captivity. There's only a small group of you guys. In verse 7, God is encouraging Zerubbabel, and he says, "Nothing," that's a big word, isn't it? "Nothing, not even a mighty mountain will stand in Zerubbabel's way. It will become like a plain like a flat spot before him." In other words, when God calls you to do something, there's not a force or a situation on earth that will actually stop you from doing that. If it's God's will that you accomplish it, you will be able to accomplish it. And he goes on to say, and when Zerubbabel sets the final stone in place, when he sets the final stone in place of the temple, the people will shout, "May God bless it." May God bless it. So they're actually inviting God to be, praised in this whole process. I love the fact that before the construction even starts, though, God already sees how it's going to end up. God already sees how that thing is going to work out. Maybe you can't see how it's going to work out. And before you ever even attempt to do what God has put in your heart to do, God knows what the results will be if we surrender to him and allow him to have that power and that control. In verse 8, it says, "Then another message came to me from the Lord. Zerubbabel is the one who laid the foundation of this temple, and he will complete it." God's telling you, this is going to happen in your lifetime. I know you think that this could never happen, that there's no way you could get this done. I did a little research on the background of this story this week, looking at a couple of commentaries. And what I found is that the initial phases of the construction, it sounds so, we read it and we think, wow, that's great, he was able to do it. In the initial phases of the construction, when they first started, it was actually really slow. And it was pretty awkward. It was not impressive at all. And if you read in the book of Ezra, it talks about this. There were times when people would go, and they would go and visit the early stages of the construction of the new temple, and they cried. Now, some commentaries say they cried because they were happy to see that the temple was being built again. But even more people believe, even more researchers have done, they believe people were crying because it was so pathetic, because it was so embarrassing. This is all you got. They're there because they saw that the progress was going really, really slow, and it was unimpressive. You got a little pile of rocks here and a little pile of rocks there. This is nothing. We traveled all this way. We heard you were rebuilding the temple, and we get here, and there's nothing here. This isn't going to amount to anything. And the truth is, that's how we often feel. That's how it often feels in life. Like you set a goal. You say, you know what? I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to lose some weight. I got to lose all this weight. And I've been you work at it for 2 or 3 weeks. You weigh yourself. You've lost 1 pound. You're like, this is nothing. This is never good. This is going nowhere. This is not going to help at all. I've got to make big changes. I got to try hard. This is probably more than I can ever even do. And sometimes we get embarrassed because of the small beginnings, the results of what we're trying to do. And our effort seems to bring out this pathetic response. But in verse 10, I want to show you this because this is what's really, really encouraging to me. And I hope this will encourage you as well. God said, "Do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work even begin. Don't despise the fact that it's going to take you a while. Don't worry about the fact that it's not going to happen overnight. Do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. I mean, look, you got to put one stone on top of another, right? One step begins a journey. You got to start somewhere. You have to take a step. You have to do something. And we look at that and we think, I'm never going to get anywhere. But God says, no, don't worry about this. I like seeing you get started. I like to see you try. I mean, look around. We're here in church. We're not running at full capacity, are we? I mean, it's great that we can come in here. We can socially distance if we want to, but we're not full, are we? Not yet. But we're just getting started. We're just getting started after all this COVID stuff. And don't miss the fact that God rejoices in the fact that we are moving forward, that we are going to be part of something. Don't miss the fact that God rejoices even in small beginnings, because he can see the end where we can't. One of the challenges is so often we look at other people, especially on social media like platform. We look at other people's lives and it seems like they just have everything together. Like they have the perfect, they show pictures of this perfect deal and I'm microwaving mine, you know, or they take the perfect vacation and I'm lucky if I can, you know, do something. But you see their highlight reel. That's what they're showing you. They control what you see. You're seeing their highlight reel, and yet you look at your own life and you see all this drama. They got this awesome life going on and you've got all this drama in your life. They have it appears that they have their act together, right? You just assume that they do. But we're all the same. We're all humans. We all struggle through life. They look like they have it all together, but when you look at our lives, we see the problems, we see the failures, we see the small beginnings, right? We know everything that's going on, and we get intimidated. And when you look at people in the Bible too, same thing when you're reading scripture, you read about some of these heroes, like you look at David. David was a friend of God. David was called a man after God's own heart. What did he have to do to become that? I mean, he took down Goliath, right? I want to take down Goliath. I want to conquer some things in life. But what we often don't think about, what we often forget is how this guy for years as a young man growing up, he was faithful for years and years and years out in the South 40. Right? His family considered him inconsequential. And he's out there in the fields being a shepherd, tending to sheep day after day after day. Now, let me tell you what, that's not a glorious or enviable job. Right? This isn't something anybody aspired to do. He was living outdoors most of the time guarding these sheep, but he was learning to be faithful. He was learning to be faithful in the small things, and God knew that. That's why he trusted him with these bigger things later on in life. People look at Ruth and Boaz, great couple in the Bible, very, very romantic story. You know, ladies all the time would say, I want a husband like Boaz. He's so understanding. He's so compassionate. He seems like such a nice guy. I wish I had a husband like Boaz. Okay, but you may forget that for a long time, Ruth was actually very faithful in her life to a woman named Naomi when she didn't have to be. And in fact, it would have actually been easier for her if she wasn't that kind of person. But Ruth was faithful for years and years and years, and it was in that faithfulness that Ruth had to Naomi, that opened the doors for God's blessing through this wonderful guy, Boaz, and they had this great relationship. It's the things that no one ever really saw or thought about that resulted in the marriage that most people would like to have. You look at Daniel in the Old Testament book of Daniel. Daniel was an amazing man of faith. I mean, oh my gosh, he's he's standing there in the middle of the lion's den, right? He's not afraid or anything like that. His faith was unwavering. I want to be like that. Well, maybe, you know, if you realize that for his entire life, 3 times a day, year after year after year, no matter what he was doing, you know what Daniel did? He would stop 3 times a day to purposely pray to God. And to be in intercessionary prayer with God. He knelt down 3 times a day and he sought God in prayer. What kind of faith do you think that you would have if you devoted 3 specific times a day to actually seek God's wisdom and guidance and pray to God? How do you think that would change your faith if you were going to do that? It's the things that no one sees, or you don't connect the dots or whatever, that result in the things that everybody wants. I remember once I read a book on leadership, and it was called Coach Wooden on leadership. It's about John Wooden. He's considered to be one of the best basketball coaches of all time. Anybody here ever heard of him? I'm not a big basketball. I'll tell you, I'm not a college basketball fan. I'm not really a fan of basketball at all. But I do want to understand leadership. And so I read this book on leadership. And do you know what the very first practice, every single season, whether he was in middle school or high school or college or whatever, the very first practice for Coach Wooden teams over the years, he'd bring all his players in, but they didn't do drills. They didn't run sprints. They didn't practice free throws or talk strategy or any of this stuff. The very first practice for a Coach Wooden team consisted of setting down and putting on your shoes, putting on your socks, putting on your shoes in a very deliberate, very careful way, because Coach Wooden had found that no one ever thinks about how you put on your socks and shoes. You just do that real quickly, and therefore you get blisters, and then you get injuries and that kind of thing. And so he made it a very important point that they were going to be, as a team, that they were going to pay attention to the details, because the details, the little details, matter. And if you want to do things with excellence, then you start with the small things, because they matter so much. And in fact, John Wooden, he said this. He said, it's the little things that are vital. Little things make big things happen. Or I would say little things make big things possible. I love that. It is so often the small things, the small steps that nobody even thinks about or sees, that result later on into big changes that you're looking for. So here's kind of what we're going to do in the next several weeks. I'm going to give you kind of just a quick preview here. We're going to focus on 3 very important things. And you probably already know these things, because they're important in life to control these things. We're going to focus on our thoughts, our words, and our habits. Somebody once said this, and I want you to think about it. Why are your thoughts so important? Our thoughts are important because our thoughts actually become words. Scripture says what is in a man's heart will come out his mouth, right? So our thoughts become words. Our words become actions, and our actions will turn into habits in our life. And those habits will dictate, for better or for worse, a lifestyle that we have made for ourselves. So next week, we're going to talk about our thoughts. To see if we can make some small changes in the way that we think about things. And we're going to talk about our life and how much our thought life, the Bible has a lot to say about how your thoughts can change your life. Because God says in the Bible that as a person thinks in their heart, guess what? That's who they are. That's how they are. So this is very powerful. You want to change your life? You have to start by changing your thoughts. Week number 3, we're going to talk about our words, the words that come out of our mouth, because there's power. The power of life and death is in the tongue, and you'll eat the words. This is just so important to not have negative words, destructive words coming out of your mouth all the time. You want to change your life? Change your thoughts, change your words. And then week number 4, we're going to talk about some habits, how we can establish some habits, how we can get past some other habits that we don't want, because you become what you repeatedly do. You really do. Do it over and over and over again. It becomes a habit. That's who you become. You want to become a different person? You're going to have to change your habits. So we're going to do this in progression. We're going to make some small changes in the way that we think, in the way that we speak, and in the things that we do, how we behave. And it's in these small changes. I'm just telling you what, over time, these small changes, maybe nobody will even notice that you've made these changes internally or in your life, but the results, I think, can be really, really life-changing, because it's almost impossible to describe the power of a focused life. And this is all about having a focused life and becoming the people that God has called us to be, and the people that you probably want to be. When you focus on one thing, it's amazing what you can accomplish. A few years ago, I was studying on focus, and I looked at the Bible. One of the things that technology has made possible is you can not only look up certain words, because I always had a concordance, I could look up words, but what you can do now with computers, you can look up word combinations. You can look up computers have made it possible that you can actually search for not just words, but combinations of words, and see where that whole thing kind of comes from. And I found that the combination of the words one thing, I looked up one thing. How often does this phrase, one thing, show up in Scripture? For example, David in the Old Testament, King David, he was known as a man after God's own heart, right? Let me tell you why. You know what's the one thing that he wanted, the thing that he wanted most in his life above anything else? You don't have to wonder, we don't have to debate, because he actually told us. This is what David said. The one thing that I want above everything else, the one thing I desire is to dwell in the house of the Lord forever. That's it. That was the number one thing that he desired, was to be in God's presence. If that's the thing that you're desiring most in your life, imagine how different your life could be. You could be described as a man or a woman after God's own heart. I mean, is that possible still today? Absolutely it is. There's power in focus. Paul in the New Testament, you remember Paul in the New Testament, many things, people said a lot of things about Paul, and Paul, a lot of people call him the greatest apostle out of all of them. But if you remember, he had a really horrible past. He actually made a lot of mistakes along the way. He tried to wipe out Christians. He wanted to stop Christianity before it ever even started to spread. But he becomes a servant of Christ, right? And as a Christian, he also faced massive persecution. because he switched sides, right? So he was beaten, he was shipwrecked, he was left for dead, snake bitten, he was hungry, he was cold, he was stoned a couple of different times, and not recreationally speaking. I mean, he was like, they threw rocks at him, they wanted to kill him. He was, you can say whatever you want about him, but this guy endured some of the most massive persecution and pain of anybody ever. And you know what he said? Rather than saying, oh my gosh, I'm going to dwell on my past. I was such a horrible guy. It's been so hard. It's been so hard on me personally. You wouldn't believe how mean people are. No, he didn't say that. Here's what he said. You know what he said? He said, I focus on this one thing. Forgetting what is behind. Forgetting all of that. Forgetting how bad I was or how bad I was treated. I'm looking forward to what is ahead. I'm not going to let my past define me. God has something more for me. Even if I suffer on this earth, I'm looking into eternity, and I'm going to let go of all that junk, and I'm moving forward because God has something more planned for me. This one thing I do, forgetting the past. The one that when you focus on one thing, it's amazing what you can accomplish in your life, what God can empower you to accomplish. But when you miss your one thing, let me tell you, when you miss your one thing, it's amazing the blessings that you will also miss out on. Jesus, one time, he's visiting with his good friends Mary and Martha in Luke chapter 10. Mary was enjoying the presence of Jesus. Martha was wigging out, right? You guys know the story. The tea's getting cold, the dishes don't match, whatever. So I don't know what she was doing, but you can use your imagination. And Jesus looked at her and he said, Martha, you're upset about so many things, but only what? One thing is needed. Mary, who was sitting at the feet of Jesus, has chosen what is better, and it's not going to be taken away. And there's one thing that really matters in this moment, Martha, and you missed the most important thing. You were focused on the wrong stuff. Jesus encountered a wealthy guy one time, very successful young businessman. This is early on in his ministry. This is the kind of guy you want on your team. He's a young guy. He's full of energy. He's well-respected. He's got all this money. And Jesus, he's like, hey, Jesus, I want to join your team. I want to be one of your disciples. I want to follow you. But the problem was, his material possessions, the things that he had in life were so important to him. They were the most important thing in life to him. And he was missing out on what was really the most important thing in life. And that was to become a follower of Jesus. And so Jesus said, hey, you know what? You're doing pretty good, guy, but you lack one thing. There's one thing. You're doing good things, but one thing, only one thing. You get this one thing right and you can change the world. Go and sell all your possessions. Now, Jesus didn't call us all to do that. This is the thing that is standing in this guy's way. And so he said, you go and sell all your possessions, give that stuff away. Don't let it weigh you down anymore, and come follow me. But you know how that story ends, right? The guy walks away sad. Why? Because he wasn't willing to focus on that one thing, to do that one thing that could have changed his life and his eternity. And it's amazing what a life of focus can actually bring about in your life if you can focus like that. It's often the small things that make a difference in your life that become these big changes that everybody wants. So here's your assignment. Very simple, very focused, very direct, very doable. And what I'm going to challenge you to do is get as focused as you can. And don't give me a whole list of New Year's resolutions. I don't want you to write down everything that you want to change in your life. If you write down 3 big things, you're never going to change anything. So don't do that. What I want you to do is pray and ask God, seek God for one specific word. I want you to, in your prayer life this week, look for one word that kind of dictates and details where you want to head to out of this change in life, out of the things that we've gone through. I read a book one time. It was called One Word That Will Change Your Life. And it's a pretty good book. It's a secular book, but it's an amazing, because it's really about this focus. Not a whole list of stuff that you want to change, but just one word. Focus on one word. And you will not believe the difference that this can make in your life when you become focused on one, what I believe to be God-breathed word for your life. And it can help direct your life and the decisions that you're going to make and where you're going to end up. My one word for this season in my life is the word strengthen. That is the word that I chose, and let me tell you why. I'm really interested and committed in trying to stay in shape, and I want to strengthen my body, but I also want to strengthen my walk with God. I want to be healthier, but I also want a closer walk with God spiritually. So strengthen is really a word that I believe that God gave to me, not just for me, but also for our church, because I think we want to be stronger in our faith here at Journey, don't you? I think we want to understand God better. We want to strengthen our relationship. And after receiving this word, strengthen, I prayed, God, what one word would kind of sum up what I need in my life? I looked for a verse to kind of back that up, because this is really important too. And I found a verse that will encourage me as I go. And the verse I chose is from Isaiah chapter 54. And it shows a desire for growth, but the importance of being strong. And it reads this way. It says, enlarge the place of your tents. This is a message God gave to the Israelites. Enlarge the place of your tent. Stretch out your tent curtains wide. Don't hold back. And I love that. Lengthen your cords. But what we also need to do is you need to strengthen the stakes. Don't just make it bigger, but it has to be stronger on its foundation. In other words, if you want to influence, if you want to grow your influence, if you want to grow larger, you're going to have to make sure that, as Emmett said, that your roots are deeper, that your roots have gone deep enough to sustain that kind of growth. And if we're expecting to grow, we need to strengthen our root system. I'm going to tell you right now, the strength of our church is not just what you see on a Sunday morning. I mean, this is the culmination of the week, but what you see here, really the strength of what goes on here is the stuff that goes on behind the scenes, because there are people that come in. You guys know who you are. You make this service even possible. It's not the stuff that people see me do on Sunday, really, but it's the things that you rarely see that make everything happen and gives us depth and strength. And we need your help. We need people to be able to step up and do something. We have people who come and clean. We have people who come and do the yard outside, and people that make sure that things are repaired. Because like I said, I'm not a handy guy. I don't do any of that stuff. Right? I do my part, and I do it to the best of my ability, but everybody can contribute in some way. And one of the things that is amazing is the amazing generosity of people in this church that make it all possible for us to even be in this community. And so it is a full team effort. It is all of us together, but for each one of us individually. So strengthen is something I believe is not just for me, but it's for our church. But let me ask you, what is your one word going to be? You know, I want you to give you this thought. I want you to take this, and I want you to go home and pray. At this time, coming out of this season in your life, what one word do you think would best summarize where you need to go and where you want to go? Perhaps it's grow. Maybe your one word is grow because you want to grow in your understanding of God. You want to grow in your knowledge of who God is. Or help because you really need to get in. Your body needs some attention. Maybe your one word is going to be health. But what is the one thing that you're going to focus on in this season? And it's not a defined time. It's not like over the next 3 months, right now in your life. What is the one thing? Choose one thing to focus on and look for one word. And then what I want you to do is look for some scripture to back that up. Your word might be grace or love. And you want to seek to love people. You want to be that Christ-like example in love or in grace. What will your one word be? And then find a verse. Find a verse that you can memorize, that you can hang on to, so that you could pray this in your prayer life and you can embrace it. And that's where it all starts. It all starts there. When you pray and you seek God, when you hear and believe that God has spoken to you about a word, and you add a verse to that, that's going to bring so much strength and focus to your life. And suddenly when you wake up, there's that verse, there's that word, and it'll give you hope, and it'll encourage you, and you can focus on it all throughout your day. And you know, then in a week, in a month, in a year, at some point, you may be able to say, you know what? I'm a different person. People may even come up to you and say, wow, what is the deal with you? You know, I mean, you used to be kind of rude and abrupt, and now you're so loving. You know, how did you change? What did you do to change in your life? They're going to say, I don't get it. You know, you weren't always like equipped to talk about God. Now you bring God into every conversation. How is it that you know so much about God? How is it that in your life you have joy? Everybody else is depressed around you, but somehow, even in bad situations, you have joy. How is that, you know? You didn't seem to have a good marriage, but now you're married. You and your wife seem so close. How did you guys get so close? How did you guys become such good friends? How come you're like newlywed? What happened to you? What happened to you? You weren't even that close, and now it's amazing. What big things did you have to do to get to that place in your life? And you'll be able to say, you know what? It wasn't a big thing. It was some small things. But I dedicated myself to these small things, and nobody even noticed I was making these changes in my life, and now my life is totally different. God loves when you are faithful. God rejoices in seeing the work even begin from the very start. And then at some point, you're gonna meet God. And I know you, just like me, you want to hear him say, well done, thou good and faithful servant. You know, you chose the right path. And when people look at you and wonder, well, how is it your life is so different? It seems like you've got your act. That's when you become one of those people. They're like, you seem like you've got this all together. How did you get to that place? And you'll be able to say, well, when you focus on one thing and it becomes part of your life, and that changes other things and it changes more things. And over time, don't let anybody tell you it's always the big things. It's not. Sometimes it is the small things that we do. And that makes all the difference. It can make all the difference. Don't try to change everything, but change one thing, one small thing. It'll give you the big changes that everybody wants. I'm going to call the worship team up, and they're going to